Hello there everybody, Sam's Trades here, welcome back to the railway, and today I'm going to try to create yet another monstrosity to run on my model railway, except this time this one isn't going to be designed to break any records. So, the moment of truth, let's see if this track vacuum cleaner turns on, shall we? Let's see if it actually works, here we go. Oh, it does. So, as you may know, I, for many years in fact, have used this Dapol track cleaner to clean my model railway track, and it does work very, very well. In fact, I don't use any of the cleaning functions. The only one I use is the vacuum cleaner, and it does work very, very well. However, these things are very, very expensive. 65 quid this thing costs you, and to be honest, it's a very simple device. I can recommend them because they work very, very well, but obviously it's very expensive. So, I wondered whether there would be an alternative method to create a vacuum cleaner for the model railway, which might work just as well or possibly even better. So what I did was I went onto eBay and bought these two little handheld USB vacuum cleaners designed for 5 volts. They were very, very cheap, less than 10 quid for both of them. And I'm going to use those to try and create a vacuum cleaner. Now, at this point, I don't know whether it's going to work, so whether or not you try this at home, I will leave up to you to decide. But we're going to give it a try, and hopefully it's going to be quite an interesting project. Whether it will work or not is yet to be discovered, but hopefully it will be fun. So let's get started. Okay, so let's give this a little bit of a try then. So first of all, a bit of a disclaimer. I want to tell you that I'm not very much of a craftsman. In fact, I'm not really much of a model builder. I'm a little bit too ham-fisted for that, to be honest, and most of the devices I create, while they normally work, unless something goes badly wrong, they never look pretty. I don't seem to have the patience to make things look nice. So this might be functional, but it isn't going to be pretty. So if you decide to follow this design, or in fact any of my designs, if you want it to look nice, you'll have to add a little bit of ingenuity on of your own. But yeah, we'll try and get this to work. So I'm going to try and mount the vacuum cleaners onto this old coach chassis, and I think this ought to be large enough to take them both, I think. As you can see, it's got no wheels. The wheels that came on it originally were made of plastic, but obviously we want this thing to pick up power, so they have to go. So that's going to be the first job. We're going to try and figure out how to get power on board this. So I've got some Hornby wheels here, which are made of metal, as you can see, and I'm going to show you how you do, once again, a very rough and ready conversion so that these can pick up through the axles. And I like picking up through the axles better than the wheels themselves because it just, well, there's less friction involved. So the basic plan for getting power on board is I've prepared these little brass strips, which I'm going to sit here and here, and they'll be glued in place eventually. And onto those I'm going to solder these little pickups, little copper pickups that I think I stole these from an old mainline N2, and they're going to sit in there like that, and they're going to be bent in position so that they touch the pickups, or sorry, they touch the axles on the wheels that we're going to put in. So that is a very simple design, and then we'll drill some holes in the bottom of the chassis and try and get wires through there. That shouldn't be a problem. So that's the plan. First things first though, I'm going to show you, and it is very rough and ready. I wouldn't recommend doing this for serious models. This, if it doesn't work, isn't going to have cost me much, and it certainly isn't going to be a big loss. But don't do this if you're, serious about it. Find a better way to do it. But if you're in a rush, I'm not really in a rush, but I don't like messing around. I like doing things quick. Then this is what you can do. So I'm just going to grab a file, excuse me, while I probably cover up the camera. So I've got a couple of files here. So what we do is we're going to have this bogie picking up power from one track and this bogie picking up power from the other. So what I like to do is I rough up a small portion of the axle like this. Just get that nice and rough. In other words, we can solder to it. And then you do the same to a bit of the wheel as well. So try and roughen that up a little bit. So with a bit of luck, we can get a bit of solder to bridge between these. Now, this is not an ideal situation because when you take a soldering iron to it, it's going to melt the plastic insulation. So you've got to be quite speedy with this. And if you're not, it will come back to bite you. But we'll try it. Sometimes this works and sometimes it doesn't, depending on the wheel. If it doesn't work, you have to use a little bit of wire to bridge the gaps, which works just as well. But we'll try it without the wire first, like so. Oh, that was a fairly decent demonstration, that worked. So, I don't know, I'll tell you what, once this is built, I'll take some close-ups rather than me messing around with the camera. But yeah, oops, it's a bit hot, perhaps shouldn't touch it. But yeah, if well, let's see, let's get the meter. And now we should have that wheel in common with the axle, and we can check that with the meter. So let's put it onto the beeper. Okay, and that is indeed working. Okay, cool. So, quick time lapse, I'll just do that to the rest of the wheels. Okay, so now I've got the 4 axles. Oop, that's still a bit too hot. Yeah, it's a very rough and ready solution, and I don't think any sort of proper modelers would ever sink as low as to do something like this. However, I've never claimed to be one of those, so I can get away with it just fine. So they're okay. I'm going to put those carefully to one side and let those cool down, and I have tested them all for continuity. So now let's take a look at the actual chassis and see if we can kit this out with a few pickups. So first things first, I've got those 2 copper plates that I mentioned to start with, and onto those I'm just going to solder a couple of blobs of solder each. So one in the middle where the pickup will join, and then one at one edge where the wire is going to join. And then I'm just going to take the actual pickups themselves, which are already quite nicely bent into shape, and on the underside I'm just going to clip these into place if possible. On the underside I'm going to be generous with the amount of solder I put onto there, so let's cake this in solder, and then with a bit of careful manipulation I'm hoping I'll be able to get this to get it to solder rather onto one of these brass plates. So let's try that, but that seems to be alright. And now we've got a nice flat surface, of course, to glue down onto the coach, so that's good. Okay, so let's get some holes drilled into the coach itself then, or into the chassis of the coach. Let's grab the drill, see if I can do that. See how it goes. Really should be putting something underneath there, shouldn't I? Yeah, this is the problem when you botch things. But yeah, that'll do. Pair of scissors, that'll do. There we are. Well, that'll do. I'll get some nice nice wire in there. That'll be fine, I think. Let's do the same with this one then. I'm hoping these will go through without upsetting the wheels. Okay. Yep. Well, that was straightforward enough, wasn't it? So I think I'm going to put the wires on before I solder everything in place, or before I hot glue it all in place. This might be a record time build. How fast can I rush through a model railway item build? Yeah, it's not advisable that you rush, but you see, I'm making videos, so I've got a good excuse for rushing. Yeah, to be honest, I tend to look forward to the end result a bit too much. Anyway, speaking of not wasting any time, we will skip ahead a little way. I'll keep filming and I'll do a time lapse, and I'll come back to you once I've got the pickups sorted and we're ready to put the wheels in. Okay, so that's all done and the pickup assemblies are now glued in place at opposite ends. The slight concern is that I think the wire I've used isn't quite flexible enough, and so there is a little bit of resistance in turning the bogies. So my advice, learn from my mistakes, use pretty thin wire, DCC wire if you can. I'm going to try and get away with this because obviously I don't think they're going to have to turn a great deal, are they? But yeah, it's a bit of a concern, but I'm sure it's going to work fine. Well, I don't know how sure I am, but reasonably sure that it should be okay, at least I hope. So let's try fitting some of the axles then, very carefully if possible. And I will trim the pickups down a little bit once we've confirmed that it's all working. Okay, and this should be a decent little setup. We should have 2 wheels picking up on each rail, which should be fine. And yeah, hopefully we won't get any point work issues or anything like that, any cutouts. So I'm hoping it'll all be good. I'm hoping it will. Okay. Bit of friction there. Yeah, we have to make sure it's not touching the wire. Yes, I think the wire might be interfering there. Where's my little screwdriver? See if we can poke that wire out the way. Don't want much friction on here if I can help it. Yep, there we are, that's not touching. That might need a bit of adjusting then if that's going to be a problem, but I think because we're sitting on the wires here, it's causing a bit more pressure than it would normally get. Okay, and then the final one. Shove this in place. Okay, so I'm happy with that. They're all reasonably freewheeling now, or as free as they can be with a little bit of copper touching them. So let's grab the meter back and just make sure I've got a good connection, and I think it's worth doing this really before you start disconnecting things. So let's give this a little try and just make sure we've got continuity. So let's just pop onto this wire here and test some of these wheels. So it's not that one. Yep. And no, nothing there. So we've got an issue there, the wheel hasn't quite soldered properly, which is strange because I did test them, so that one will need looking at again. Other side. That's strange, so that one's not either. But neither is the axle. So it's the pickup itself. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so the pickup just needs bending inwards a little bit on that one, and then I need to check the soldering on this one. So I'll make those changes and I'll come back to you once it's all working. Okay, so my dodgy little pickup assembly is all together, and now I can start thinking about how I'm going to mount these vacuum cleaners onto the chassis itself. So I'm thinking we're going to put one at either end like this, and then perhaps have a different method of coupling, maybe with like a bit of fishing wire, so that I can put a vac on each end like this, which I think would be quite cool. One problem is though, we've got these LEDs underneath, which is going to stop me from gluing these flush to the actual body itself, chassis rather. Okay, that looks good. We've got a hole in the bottom now, but you won't see that because we're just going to mount that there like that. So now we're going to get a piece of track, or I'm going to get a piece of track, and I'll just have a quick look at the sort of, well, just need to really figure out what sort of angle I need to solder these, not solder, I can't speak today, hot glue them on, so that they are going to be hoovering quite close to the track. Obviously we do want them close, otherwise they're not going to pick up a lot of the dust. But obviously not so close that they're going to be touching the sleepers and causing derailments, but obviously close enough so that they're actually going to get the dirt. So that's the idea of this. So I need to be careful not to obstruct these wires either. So it needs to be at about that sort of height. So I might create something here, just a wedge underneath, although it's going to have to be a bit further forward than that. That should be all right, shouldn't it? Tell you what, what I might do is I'm going to angle them a bit more than I need, right? And then what I can do is I can trim this bit of sleeving that pops out either end, and that way I know I can adjust it and get it exactly right. So I think that sounds like a good plan if you ask me. And of course the reason I've got to, I don't think I've explained this, is that they run via USB, which is approximately 5 volts, which means just one is going to get blasted a little bit on 12 volts, obviously. So we don't want to run them on 12 volts, we want to run them on 5 or 6. And so if I put 2 of them in series, the idea is I should be able to run a couple of them on 12 volts, and hopefully that will work. I'm thinking also that one of them should have the different attachment on, because one of the attachments from the vacuum cleaner, if I find it, has got quite nice little brushes on it, as you can see. So I'm thinking I'll fit one of them with the brushes, and that can be the one that goes backwards, obviously, just brushing along the track as it goes. Thought that would be a nice extra bonus feature. So that'll have to go on the other end. Right, has this gone off yet? No, not quite. I won't move it around too much yet then. So I'm going to try and find some scrap plastic actually. Oh, I've got plenty here. This is my secret ingredient. I've talked about this before. CD cases. They work great. So I'm just going to cut myself a support for the back while we're waiting for the glue to go off. There we go. So that is going to wedge in at the back somewhere. So let's get a nice flat end and try and get this support. And then I'll flood it with hot glue and make sure it's not able to move. So I'm just trialing and erroring this. Cut it to size. Yeah, still too large. And this is all done with hot glue, by the way. I'm not using any epoxies with this. Usually I suppose I would use epoxies, but obviously as a very, very quick project, I don't want to. I just want to use quick hot glue. Right, tiny bit more plastic off there, and that should be good to go. I wonder if this glue's gone off yet. Well, sort of. I don't want to mess around with it too much until it has. Let's turn the track around, shall we? Not careful not to pull on the USB lead. There we go. And we'll wire it all up once everything's in place, I think. Okay, so that looks good. So let's put some hot glue on the base of this. I did think about putting different motors in and putting 12-volt motors in, but then I thought, well, if I buy two, I wouldn't need to even do that. So that's a little support at the back of the thing, just to keep it from moving, keep it supported, which is obviously going to be useful. So let's leave that there then. We'll leave that to dry. Well, not dry. Well, I suppose it is like drying, isn't it? Yeah. And then I'll put some glue on the top part of that support, and that should hold it in place nicely. Okay, so this one's attached. I'm not going to do any messing around with it right now because some of the glue's still not quite dried, but it's at least sturdy now, it's rigid, so I can start putting this second one on. I've cut off their tails, so to speak, as you can see, no more USB lead on the end. I've got rid of those because I'm not going to be using them, and the only worry is that I might have tugged one by mistake and pulled something off, so I've gotten rid of those, which I think is okay. It's a good move. And now let's look at fixing on this second one. Ah yes, let's cut off the LED first. Okay, so that's on. Again, I'll trim the bristles if I need to, if they're putting too much pressure on the track, but obviously you have to be careful with that because once they're trimmed you can't rebuild them, although technically I can because I've got two of these vacs, so I've got two of each attachment. Or alternatively, if the brushes aren't a good idea and they're getting caught, I'll just swap it for one of the normal attachments like the other one had. But luckily, because I've got the luxury of deciding that later, as long as I don't destroy any of them in my stupid experiments, but I'm going to try not to. So I'm just going to cut myself another support for this one. I know roughly what height it has to be now, although I am angling this one slightly differently so that the bristles touch the track, because I want them touching the track this time. Okay. I really enjoyed this, by the way. If there's any other ideas you've got on what other slightly odd devices I could create for the railway, let me know. I'd be interested to hear what you've got in mind. What a weird creation. Look at this thing. How bizarre. I don't know how it's going to take curves yet because it's now very, very long indeed. So, yeah. Might not like curves very much, mightn't it? But we will see. We'll see. Right. Well, next job then, folks, is to wait for the glue to go off, obviously, and then I'll wire it up and see if it works. Okay, I'm quite satisfied with that. Now, looking at this, obviously I ought to have used a shorter wheelbase coach or even a wagon, because looking at this, it's going to swing out quite a way, and actually they could have been a lot closer together, couldn't they? But oh well, can't help that now. And it's all looking good, so let's wire this up and see if this is going to work. So first of all, I'm going to strip these, and I'm going to at least try to make the wiring look a little bit neat and tidy, if not for, you know, for the sake of it working properly. So I will put some cable ties on it all at the end and really make a bit of a better job of beautifying it. So let's get some pliers then and strip these wires. And we're putting them in series, of course, which means, well, in series. I don't know how to explain series other than in series, but hopefully you know what I mean. So let's try and do this. So I can't remember what's on and what's off, so we'll set them like that and see if they work. This controller power supply, yes, unfortunately doesn't have a lot of current at its disposal, which probably means, yeah, which means we haven't got enough power there, unfortunately. So what say you? Shall we take this onto the Don't really want to take it onto the track straight away. But yeah, I'll try and find a way to get a bit more power to this. Okay, so I've tested those off camera. I'm sorry I've not shown you that, but I suppose we will save the on video testing until it's all ready to go. Yeah, it seems very, very power hungry. I will connect this up to an ammeter at some point and find out just how much power it's consuming, but it is quite hungry, yes. So yeah, I reckon we're certainly going to need, well, I think it'll be fine. I don't know exactly how much until I've obviously measured it, but yeah, I reckon best part of an amp it's going to be pulling, which makes sense because they're only 5-volt motors, so they're going to need a bit more current, aren't they? So yeah, interesting. Luckily my power supplies are able to put out an amp without much problem. They're going to overheat a little bit if you do it for hours on end, but just a quick once over through the layout, just to vacuum it, should be all right. Obviously I will do a full check on a very beefy power supply and find out just how much current they need. And you know, if they're trying to pull 2 amps or something stupid, I'm sure they won't be, but if they are, then clearly I'll need a rethink. Okay, so the heat shrink's on, and here's a cool device for you. It's a heat gun, so if you ever need any heat, this is the great thing. In fact, if I can find them on Amazon, I'll put a link in the description for you. Not very expensive, to be honest with you, and also not working. Let's see if I can remedy this. Okay. Yeah, these things have to be plugged in. That's why it didn't work. So yeah, they're great. They're really, really good. Saves you having to have lighters and things. I don't particularly want lighters up here anyway. So yeah, perfect things. I'll turn the wind up a little bit more. And you've got full temperature control over this. So it's really good, and it's great for desoldering as well. If you get into a mess and need to desolder something, yeah, very, very handy things. So there we go. That's the heat shrink sorted. There we are. Good. Let's turn that off. Okay, well, I'm going to get some cable ties then, and we will tidy up these cables. There we are. Oh, that looks a bit better, doesn't it? And there's still space under there to put some weights on and things. So let's snip those off. Careful not to snip through any wires, that would be embarrassing. And let's get it down onto the track and see if it works. My goodness, I hope it does. Okay, so there it is down onto the track, and you may notice that this is now looking a little bit different than it did last time you saw it, and that's because I put it down onto the track, and to my astonishment it drew over an amp. 1.3 amps I measured, and the controller is only designed for about 800 milliamps. So obviously I didn't want that. I definitely didn't want to be overloading my controller like that. So in the centre of the car here, and I'm quite glad now that I left such a big space, I put some power resistors. There's 3 of them here in parallel, and that gives about 3 ohms, and that just drops the current draw down to, well, basically exactly 0.8 amps, 800 milliamps, which is exactly what we want, so as not to overload the controller. The other thing I've added is this little thing. It looks like a button cell or something, but it is actually a little magnet, and that is going to be the coupling. So I'm going to reintroduce to you the Tart class. This is the Tart class from the original April Fool's Day video, which used to have the Princess tender body on it. I've now converted it to battery power, and ever since that video, so 2 or 3 years ago, this has been my track cleaning car puller. And it's still going to do the same. As you can see, it's got loads of weights on it so that it's got enough pulling force to actually move this thing. And I just attach this little magnet onto the coupling, and it sticks just fine. So, the moment of truth. Let's see if this track vacuum cleaner turns on, shall we? Let's see if it actually works. Here we go. Oh, it does. And I can feel the suction. So let's take it around the track then and see if it actually stays on the track. Go on, Tart class. Give it some. So, as odd and stupid as it looks, it is vacuuming. It's working. Now, one pretty obvious design flaw with this one is on the curves. Obviously, the actual nozzles swing out quite a long way, as you can see here, which means that they're not actually vacuuming the track. So that is a design flaw, I'll admit that. And if you decide to try and make one of these, you'll want to use either a much shorter coach, or possibly even make it with 2 wagons, perhaps 2 4-wheel wagons, and so that you can get complete articulation across the whole thing. And another thing that I'm hoping to do one day is perhaps even open up the vacuum cleaners, find out whether or not they are standard motors inside there, and perhaps replace them with higher voltage motors, because a 12-volt motor should only draw about 0.2 amps. So if I put two 12-volt motors in parallel, I wouldn't need any resistors, and the current draw would be about half of what it is at the moment. So I think that's a possible improvement for this, but for the time being, it does seem as though it's working. Even though it's swinging out on the curves. So I think what we'll do now is we'll bring it to a stop and have a look inside the bins and see whether or not they've actually been able to collect any dust. Let's find out. So here's a nice first for you. Here's a shot of the inside of my bin. What a treat. Yes, I apologise that you're having to look at my bin, but I'm going to try emptying these vacs now and see what's inside. Well, obviously I know what's going to be inside. Hopefully there'll be some dirt. Now, I've only done one line. I normally do all three, so I'm not expecting to find as much dirt inside these as I would from my Dapol cleaner after I've cleaned all three tracks. But we will at least have a look and see what these have been able to pick up. So let's do the rear one first then. So this one is the one that goes along last, so this will probably have the least dust and dirt inside it, if that's anything to go by. Okay. Right. Well, it seems to have worked. There does seem to be quite a bit of a collection, as you can see there. Can you see that? Of dust on this filter. Yeah, quite a lot actually, to say this is just the back filter. The first one, the front one, might have even more, I don't know. But yeah, that seems to have worked pretty well. There's no actual sort of ballast or anything in the bin or anything like that, so perhaps it's not quite as effective, I don't know, as the Dapol version, and this magnet keeps clanging against the bin. So let's try the front one then. Let's try and get this bin off. There it goes again. Oh wow. There's a lot more in here. Can you see that? There's stuff hanging off the filter. They're not actually very good vacuums, these. They don't hold on to the the dirt very well. But, yeah, there's a lot on there, actually. So this does seem to work. It does seem to be pretty effective. And, in fact, if it isn't pulling up ballast off my railway, perhaps that's not a bad thing if it's a little bit more gentle. So, yeah, it seems to work. So, shall we end the video with a look at my bin? I think we should. So, there we go. That is the Samstrains track cleaner. It's not pretty, it's not massively effective yet, but I'm hoping to improve this, and perhaps in future videos we might see this thing be a real success. But yeah, let me know, are you going to build one? If so, let me know what you'll do differently, and ultimately let me know how it goes if you do. But for the time being, thank you for watching, folks. That was a little bit of something different at the very least, and at least now I've got an alternative to my Dapol track cleaner. Very good for cleaning straights, not great for curves yet, but apart from that, seems great. Alright, thanks folks, take care, and I'll see you very soon. Cheers everybody.